I joked that I'd cheat if I knew I wouldn't get caught. My husband overheard, and he asked for a divorce. You never realize what you have until it's gone. That's what everyone says, right? My name is Clara, I'm 32, and my life fell apart over a stupid conversation, one my husband wasn't even supposed to hear. Now I'm sitting in this tiny apartment, surrounded by overdue bills, wondering how everything went to hell so fast. Daniel and I were together for 7 years. He wasn't exactly my dream man when we met. More like the safe choice after dating guys who couldn't hold a job. He worked as an HVAC technician when we got together. Not glamorous, but stable. I worked in medical billing. The pay wasn't great, but together we managed to afford a decent house. At first, things were good. Daniel was thoughtful, always fixing things around the house. We got along well. My sister Brenda always said I was lucky to have found a good man. I'd smile and nod, but deep down, I always felt I could have done better, like I'd settled too soon while my college friends were still dating doctors and entrepreneurs. Everything changed when Daniel got promoted to manager last year. Suddenly, he was earning a lot more money, which should have been a good thing, right? But with the promotion came this new obsession with financial responsibility that drove me crazy. He started questioning every purchase on our joint account, setting budgets, constantly talking about saving for the future. Do you really need another pair of shoes, Clara? What he didn't get was that I worked hard for my money too. If he paid the mortgage, the car, and most of the utilities, I covered groceries and my own car insurance. To me, if I had money left over, it was mine to spend as I pleased. But Daniel acted like every dollar had to go into savings.so. I started stashing money in a separate account, one he didn't know about. It wasn't anything malicious, I told myself. I convinced myself he was being controlling, that his raise had given him power over me. In reality, he was just being responsible about our future. But at the time, I didn't want to see it that way. And that's where things stood when Valeria joined the medical billing office and when everything really started to unravel. Valeria was everything I wasn't, freshly divorced, carefree, living her best life. Or at least, that's what her Instagram made it seem. Unlike my other friends, who always raved about how great Daniel was, Valeria actually listened when I complained about my marriage. Men like that are so typical, she said during our first after-work drinks. They get a little power and suddenly think they control everything. Finally, someone who got me. We started having lunch together every day, and our conversations revolved around how stifling my marriage had become. With every chat, my image of Daniel shifted. He was no longer the hardworking, caring man I married, but a controlling tyrant supposedly making my life miserable. Last night, he asked why I withdrew $200 from our joint account. I told Valeria one Friday over margaritas. Like I'm a child who has to justify every expense. What I conveniently left out was that the money went straight to my secret account, which was already close to $3,000. Money Daniel knew nothing about. That's financial abuse, Valeria declared dramatically. He's controlling you with money. I felt validated, loving how she backed me up without question. Meanwhile, Daniel kept trying. He'd suggest weekend plans, movie nights, but I always found an excuse. Then I'd complain to Valeria about how boring he was. When he brought up starting a family, I shut down completely. We can't afford kids, I said coldly, even though, thanks to his financial planning, we were actually in a good position. We've been saving, he replied, brow furrowed. That's literally what we've been working for. Maybe you've been saving, I muttered, thinking of my secret account, meant for a trip to Europe, not diapers and daycare. Work became my escape. One night, while staying late, I found myself alone with Carlos, the accountant. Tall, single, with a confident smile that made me nervous, in a good way. "Doesn't your husband mind you working this late?" he asked, leaning on my desk. "Daniel doesn't control my schedule," I snapped, enjoying how Carlos raised his eyebrows, impressed. When I got home, Daniel was waiting with a covered plate in the microwave. Instead of seeing it as a kind gesture, I felt irritated, like his kindness was a trap. Another way to make me feel indebted would be why the time Daniel suggested hosting a backyard barbecue for Labor Day weekend. We were living in completely different realities. We weren't just on different pages. We were reading entirely different books. I spent the week before the barbecue complaining to Valeria. "Daniel's forcing me to throw a party for his work friends," I'd say, exasperated. The truth was, he'd asked if I was okay with it, and I'd said yes without paying much attention, too busy scrolling Instagram. I took Valeria's advice to heart and bought several bottles of expensive Cabernet with our joint card. When Daniel saw the receipt, he raised an eyebrow. "Did we really need to spend that much on wine?" he asked calmly. That was enough to set me off. "You want to have guests but don't want to spend on decent hosting?" I snapped dramatically, as if he wasn't the one covering most of our expenses. The party started at 3. Neighbors and Daniel's co-workers trickled in. I smiled, playing the perfect wife, but in my head, I was counting the minutes until everyone left. Daniel, on the other hand, was in his element, grilling burgers, telling jokes. Every now and then, he'd shoot me a hopeful look, like he thought this gathering might bring us closer. Valeria showed up late, as usual, in a sundress that turned heads. 2 glasses of wine later, I was feeling looser, my laughs a bit louder, my stories a bit more exaggerated. By my 4th glass, when Daniel approached our group, I was well past caring. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow," he said quietly. "Maybe we should wrap up by 8. "Oh, come on," I said loudly, loud enough for others to hear. "We're just getting started." Always so controlling. By 7, I was completely unchecked. Daniel had slipped into host mode, clearing plates, making sure everyone had drinks. Meanwhile, Valeria and I settled into the patio furniture with Carlos and his friend Miguel. The conversation turned to relationships. "My ex never got the concept of personal space," Miguel said. "Always had to know where I was, who I was with." "Daniel's the same," I said without thinking, even though it wasn't true. "So suffocating sometimes." Carlos laughed. "You don't seem like the type to put up with that for long." Something in his tone made me sit up straighter, twirl my hair. "You have no idea." "So why stay with him?" he asked, leaning in slightly. The attention, everything I had been feeding into for weeks, culminated in that moment. I lowered my voice, like I was sharing a secret. "Honestly, if I knew I wouldn't get caught, I'd cheat." Valeria let out a nervous laugh. Carlos raised his eyebrows, surprised. Miguel looked away, uncomfortable. But I didn't stop. "Daniel's been so controlling lately. He doesn't even deserve loyalty." Then I saw everyone's eyes shift, locking onto something behind me. I turned, expecting to see another neighbor, maybe Sandra with her judgmental stare. But no, it was Daniel, standing in the patio doorway, a stack of plates in his hands, his face wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not even pain, just clarity. Our eyes met for a moment that felt like forever. Then, without a word, he set the plates on the table, turned, and went inside. I should have gone after him right then. I should have said it was the wine talking, that I didn't mean it. But a stubborn, selfish part of me thought I should let him cool off, let him see what happens when he tries to ruin my fun. When I finally went inside, Daniel was gone. The kitchen was spotless. He cleaned everything. His bedroom door was shut. I collapsed on the couch, still in my party dress, convinced we'd talk in the morning, that this was just another fight, that he was overreacting. I had no idea I just destroyed my life with one reckless confession. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, still in yesterday's wrinkled clothes. The house was too quiet. No fresh coffee, no sound of a shower. I checked my phone. 7:37 a.m. Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. By afternoon, after no response, I went from worried to indignant. I texted Valeria. He vanished after the party, being dramatic as usual. She replied with a wide-eyed emoji. Maybe he's really upset about what you said. Please, I texted back. It's not like I actually cheated. They were just words. Monday morning, I got ready for work as usual, half expecting to find Daniel asleep in the guest room. But the house was still empty. By noon, with no contact from him, a small knot of worry started growing in my chest. That afternoon, when I got home, I saw his car in the driveway. Relief flooded me, followed by a wave of irritation. I'd spent all day worrying, and he didn't even have the decency to text. But as I walked in, something felt off. The big honeymoon photo above the fireplace was gone, leaving just an empty nail in the wall. Daniel's books on the coffee table were missing. His laptop wasn't in its usual spot. Daniel. I called, dropping my bag on the counter. Where have you been? I was worried. He appeared in the hallway, a duffel bag over his shoulder. His face was a mask of calm. No anger, no tears, just an eerie stillness. I needed time to think, he said evenly, and to get some things in order. What things? Why are you packing? I frowned. Don't you think you're overreacting a bit? It was just a drunk comment. He looked at me, really looked at me, like I was a stranger. It wasn't just a comment, Clara, he said. It was confirmation of what I've suspected for a while. He handed me an envelope without another word. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out, with our names, a list of assets to divide. Everything calculated. The world tilted under my feet. This is ridiculous, I muttered, my voice cracking. You're divorcing me over a stupid party comment? Daniel took a deep breath. No, Clara, he said, still calm. I'm divorcing you because you've made it clear you don't respect me, don't value our marriage, and would cheat on me without a second thought if you could get away with it. I called you controlling because I felt trapped. I mumbled, scrambling for excuses. But Daniel didn't react, not with anger or sadness, just that same calm that scared me more than yelling would have. You said you were waiting for your chance, building an escape fund, he continued. How am I supposed to stay with someone who's already decided they want out? I tried to respond, but my mouth went dry. The truth was, I didn't have an answer. It was just exaggeration, I insisted, my voice rising. I was showing off for Valeria and Carlos. It's not a big deal. Daniel shook his head. The fact that you said it, even as a joke, means you believe it on some level. He turned, grabbing his bag. Where have you been staying? I asked, my mind still grappling with reality. With my brother, he said flatly. I've also been talking to a lawyer. Panic turned into something heavier, a cold weight in my stomach. I separated our finances, he continued. The joint account has enough to cover the mortgage and utilities for 3 months. That'll give you time to figure out what to do with the house. My heart raced. You separated our finances? I repeated, you can't do that. That money's ours. Daniel looked at me steadily. No, Clara, that money was ours. Until you started siphoning off small amounts, month after month, for your escape fund. My face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about, I mumbled. Yes, you do. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled. I've been monitoring our account for 6 months. Every transfer to your secret account, every withdrawal, I have records of it all. The air felt thick. That was my money, I tried to justify. It came from my salary. Daniel didn't flinch. Let the courts decide that. He walked toward the door. I'm staying at Luis's for now, he said without turning. My breath hitched. You can't just walk out, I shouted. Daniel paused for a second. That's the problem, Clara, he murmured. We're past the point where talking does any good. You've been saying everything I needed to hear for months. I just wasn't listening. And with that, he left. The door closed with a sound that marked the end of everything. The days that followed were a blur of denial and panic. At first, I convinced myself Daniel was overreacting, that he'd come back after a few days, that we'd talk and fix it. But his texts were cold and formal. We can discuss this, Daniel. You don't have to act like this. Anything regarding the house or accounts will go through the lawyers. Each reply was a reminder that this wasn't a tantrum. It was final. I tried calling. He stopped answering. I called his brother. Clara, Luis said firmly, I think you should respect his space. Even Brenda grew distant. When I told her what happened, her response floored me. Clara, you really told everyone you'd cheat if you knew you wouldn't get caught? I went silent. How would you feel if he'd said that about you? It's not the same, I said quickly. He's been so controlling lately. Brenda sighed. Controlling or just responsible? Day by day, the reality sank in. Daniel wasn't coming back. The final blow came in an email from his lawyer. Attached is a breakdown of assets and accounts, along with documentation of withdrawals made from the joint account to Mrs. Torres's personal account. We request a meeting to discuss asset division. I opened the attachments, a detailed list of dates, amounts. Every withdrawal I'd made was there. Text messages between Valeria and me, screenshots where I complained about Daniel, called him boring, said I'd settled. There was no escaping the truth. Daniel had been watching everything, waiting, and now he was ready to end it all in the most organized way possible. There was no going back. The meeting with the lawyers was unbearable. Daniel sat across the table, his face neutral, while I could barely breathe. His lawyer started talking, listing terms, dividing accounts. The house will be sold, and the proceeds split, he explained. Mr. Torres covered 78% of household expenses, which allowed Mrs. Torres to use much of her salary for personal savings. They slid a document across, a breakdown of every expense, every bill paid, every dollar I'd siphoned off for my escape fund. There was no arguing with it. The numbers didn't lie. I looked at Daniel, hoping for some trace of emotion. But there was nothing. We request that Mrs. Torres provide a report of the funds withdrawn from the joint account, the lawyer continued, as these were taken from shared assets. My throat closed up. That money came from my salary, I protested weakly. The lawyer slid another document. Mrs. Torres's contribution to shared expenses was minimal, he read aloud. Mr. Torres covered the mortgage, utilities, car, and other essentials. The truth was there, printed on paper. I'd been living comfortably while secretly stashing money. Daniel hadn't been the controlling one. I'd been the selfish one that I looked to my lawyer, hoping he'd step in. But he just looked at me with resignation. There wasn't much to argue. In the end, I signed the papers in silence, knowing I'd already lost everything and could only accept the consequences. The months that followed were a spiral of chaos. At first, I thought I could handle it, that it was just a matter of adjusting to my new life. But reality hit faster than I expected. I got my share of the house sale and thought it'd be enough. But between the first and last month's rent for my new apartment, furniture, and my impulsive spending habits, the the money was gone in less than 3 months. For the first time in years, I had a budget to make ends meet. No more stable home with bills covered. No more husband handling the heavier expenses. Now, everything was on me. The silence in my new apartment was the worst. The house I'd shared with Daniel was always full of sounds, his voice calling from the kitchen, the TV playing his boring documentaries, the clink of his tools when he fixed something. Now, there was just the echo of my own thoughts. I tried going out, meeting new people. But even Carlos, the accountant I'd flirted with that night, kept his distance. No one wanted to be around the woman who'd lost everything because of her own selfishness. Even Valeria, the friend who'd fueled my resentment, stopped answering my texts. Maybe because she knew her encouragement had only fed my downfall, but the worst, the thing that truly broke me, was seeing him happy. A year later, Brenda invited me to a family gathering. I didn't want to go, but the loneliness was too heavy. So I went, and there he was, Daniel, with a woman named Mariana, a kindergarten teacher with a warm smile and a natural way with my nephews, like she'd always been part of the family. And Daniel looked different, lighter, happier, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. I stayed in a corner, watching, trying not to be obvious. Brenda came over, her expression cautious. They bought a house together, she said quietly. The one Daniel always wanted to fix up. He's renovating it himself. I felt a lump in my throat. He got another promotion too, she continued. Things are going well for him. I nodded, unable to speak because there was nothing to say. Later, in the kitchen, I overheard my mom talking to Mariana. "Daniel's so thoughtful," Mariana said with a smile. "A few weeks ago, I mentioned wanting to try this new Italian restaurant, and for my birthday, he made the reservation without me reminding him." My mom sighed fondly. "He's always been like that, always pays attention to the little details." I had to leave the room because I knew. I'd known all along. Daniel had always been like that. Thoughtful, detail-oriented, patient, loving. I was the one who didn't appreciate it. I was the one who destroyed everything. On the drive back to my apartment, memories flooded my mind. The nights he stayed up taking care of me when I was sick. The times he worked overtime so we could afford a better house. The way he looked at me on our wedding day, like I was the most incredible woman in the world. And I realized Daniel was never the problem. I was. When I got to my apartment, everything felt emptier, colder. I sank onto the couch, looking around. Nothing in this place felt like home. Just four walls filled with mistakes and regrets. My phone buzzed. A text from the guy I'd been casually seeing, canceling plans again. I didn't even bother replying, because deep down, I knew it was never serious. I looked at the table. A stack of overdue bills stared back, each one a reminder that I was alone now. No more us. No more stability I had with Daniel. And the worst part wasn't the money. It wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't the humiliation. The worst part was knowing I did this. I had a man who truly loved me, who did everything for our future, who tried to save what we had. And I destroyed it with my own hands. If I could go back to that night, to that stupid conversation at the barbecue, I'd stay quiet. I'd hug him. I'd tell him how much I loved him. But life doesn't have a rewind button. There's no undoing what I did. All I can do is move forward, face each day, each bill, each lonely night, and hope that someday I can learn from this mistake. And maybe, just maybe, find someone half as good as the man I let go.